you've recently written a book with Bruce Lyon called Our Dark Divinity. And I'm so curious to hear a little bit about that personal journey of how that book was informed by your own explorations in the dark. And then as you bring that work out, what it's giving back to
Mm.
you.
Yeah, beautiful. In some ways in some ways, the book feels like, I'm not sure about a completion, but it's, uh, it's been a result of many years of journeying and embodying and allowing the teachings to come through, not just in concepts, but actually in an embodied way. Um, so I feel like, I guess I started exploring. It's interesting. I don't know if you know, I wrote a book many years ago when I turned in my early 40s, and it was supposed to be the book about everything. I signed it Love and Light. And interestingly, yeah, there was quite a bit missing, including the descent path and the dark. And so that really kind of started my journey into descent work, actually, and recognizing it's almost like as soon as it was published, it was like, oh, okay, this whole chunk just came for me, and took me deeper into the embodiment work and the descent work and into exploring the dark as a polarity, and then leading that then folding into exploration of the non-dual and the dark that comes through that's actually beyond the polarity. Um, so I feel like really our dark divinity is almost like the rest of the book about everything in some ways. Because it was the result of the journey that unfolded after that, that really took me into my deepest work, into my soul work, and into what I would say to date feels like my biggest contribution to the field in the exploration and the revealing of that work. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. What was the book called? The first
It
book
was
you
called The
wrote?
Curing Generation. Um,
The clearing
yeah, so it's kind of
generation.
about, why is there so much for us to be working through, but more from the
Got
kind of
it.
core belief parts. But it went into meditation, and it went into health, and it went into, because I was, naturopath, wrote it in my naturopath years, so it included all those kind of things and a bit about emotions and my latest philosophy at the time, which was quite ascendant. Yeah. So it's interesting for me, in some ways, books are not the beginning of something for me. In some ways, they postmark the journey taken to
Yeah.
that point. And I feel like that's what this book has been also. It's like it was a culmination of the work that Bruce and I have done over the years. And when our two channels came together, it was really birthing this dark divinity, really. Yeah. Mm.
Wow. So beautiful. So beautiful. So speak a little bit more too. I'm curious because you wrote recently, I think you're getting ready to hold even an online container for the book, or some students are. And you wrote that this book really came through the experiences and your exploration within the dark. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about some of those experiences, if it was you in your private practice or in group work. Like how did you steep in that?
Yeah, I think it was both, actually. It was like initially those portals started to open in my own journey, whether it was through meditation, whether it was through descent work, whether it was through ritual. Um, and then as it started to move into group work, it continued to reveal through there as well. So I'd say it was both, actually. It was a revealing, and in some of the different group fields that I've been in that have been exploring those topics, it's been very emergent work, because it felt new. I mean, the non-dual is not a new concept, but working with it in such an embodied way and with integration felt new in the way it was being approached. Yeah.
Mm, beautiful. You've referred to descent work a few times, and I'm imagining there might be some people listening who have no concept for what that means. So I wonder if you could define.
Yeah, sure. In some ways, to give words around descent, almost need to talk about ascent work as well. So it's like, because I feel like they're a polarity, and the non-dual kind of opens through the center of polarities. So ascension work I see is more exploring consciousness and awareness and ascendant philosophies that are around about like going to the light or um, going into expansion, and particularly through awareness and meditation and those kind of things, which is a really important pole to be working with. And that was my earlier life, I guess, was more exploring those realms. So for me, the descent work is you could even say it's like more of the feminine path or the path of matter, where it's going more deeply into the body, not just as a concept, and but actually going down through. It's more of it going down through the layers of the emotional body and the erotic body, and going even like deeply into the trauma layers, and actually getting underneath that, which is where for me, the dark lies in matter that can then vibrate in the body. So it's the path downwards, and it tends to be sometimes quite crunchy when you first go into it. If there's like thick, crusty layers that need more intensity to move through them, and then it becomes more subtle as go down. And particularly for me, the deepest subtlety is getting under the trauma layers. Actually, getting under those is where the deepest subtlety starts to open.
Mm, mm. And what do you notice about bringing this into group and the process that people go through when you're taking them into descent work? What starts to show up?
What it shows up for them, you mean? Or
Yeah, well, probably both. Probably both
yeah.
you and them.
Yeah.
Like, what happens in this space when we start to descend together?
Yeah. In some ways, the descent work has been more in feminine containers in the shamanic womb journey work that I was doing that now others are facilitating, and also in other containers. But it feels like it's going into the emotional body and feeling it and expressing it and giving breath and giving shape and giving sound to it in a way that's connected and embodied, not bypassing or underpassing, but also not getting stuck there. Like part of the descent work is going down through the layers, so it's a very embodied process. When there's groups of people, um, it's like the whole group can the group body can go on a descent together, um, and as it goes down into these deeper layers and comes down, it creates space, and it creates space then for something else to come in and reveal. And quite often, clarity or awareness will drop in once the body's been vibrated and um, expressed what's been holding there. And it's not always about clearing stuff either. It doesn't have to be about necessarily clearing wounding and trauma. And in some ways, I think we're reaching a time in the world where we're starting to work in a different way. Can also be about embodying joy and and gratitude um and celebration and other kind of energies as well, as we start to access this more, what I would call the dark that's underneath that that is accessed through the matter point that can then sort of come and reveal something in a deeper way.
Mm, mm, beautiful. I'm so glad you mentioned the shamanic womb journey because I've been in a container with you where you led that. And um, it's such a powerful journey, and as I'm feeling back into that time and space, one of the memories I have is that it was particularly impactful for the men who experienced it, that they had an experience of of their own womb in a way that no other process had ever given them. Um, and I'd love to just have you speak a little bit to the shamanic womb journey. And also, I think a lot of the listeners of this space are really interested in how group work gets created, what the and like what are those rites of initiation that we go through, and how do we translate our journeys, and seems like you have a real gift here. So I'd love to, yeah, just have you share a little bit. How did the shamanic womb journey, how did you develop, or how did that practice transmit through you?
Yeah, it was when I was started on the descent path, and I was doing a lot of work with the emotional body, and then even working with the, like eros and the erotic body, and it just reached a point where it's like, actually, the womb. There's something there with the womb that's I'm not really at that point wasn't really seeing a lot out there, in particularly in an embodied way. Um, so it took me deeper into the exploration of that, like breathing into the womb, sounding into the womb, exploring what was out there around the womb, and then following my own journey and um, authentic experience to access the different frequencies that are available when we start to open the womb. And for me, it is actually a pathway to the dark. It's a pathway to it's the feminine pathway to the dark, or one of them is through the womb and takes us through to the void, takes us through to the cosmic womb, or whatever words you want to put around it. And through that path, I remember initially it was quite the first womb journeys I was doing were very actually quite intense and dense, to bring forth these frequencies in group. And then over the time, they became more and more subtle as the frequencies started to become more easily available. And um, I think collectively and in group, in what I was embodying and transmitting. And then, yeah, this kind of discovery that actually within the womb, that's that goes all the way through to the void or the cosmic womb or whatever you want to call it. Um, it also holds these soul frequencies of the feminine. The soul frequencies of the feminine, and so many of them as part of that journey of creating that body of work and delivering it was looking at the different shadows of the different qualities of the feminine, and how that focus can be there and miss the actual soul frequency that's available there. Like a one example that comes is longing, like the quality, the soul frequency of longing, and that can often on the way to that get stuck in neediness, and no one really wants to be the needy feminine, right? And so, but then there was this kind of discovery of, oh, if you actually really go into that neediness and really open into that neediness and open all the way through, it opens all the way through to the exquisite quality of longing. And as these soul frequencies came forth, is that they're not concepts, they're actually a vibration and a frequency that we can learn how to embody those frequencies, and it's like playing the notes of the musical instrument of the feminine in the body. And I feel like that's then a pathway into the dark as well. Mm.
Mm, mm, beautiful. I'm curious, like after I'm imagining you've done enough shamanic womb journeys that you've received something from this practice. There's a way that you are now that is maybe different than
Mm.
before. And I'm curious if you could speak to that
Mm.
difference. Like what has this practice given you?
It's it's awoken the subtle frequencies in the body, and it's been a gateway into the atoms and um into the divinity in the atoms, which for me is like the dark that's accessed through matter. So it's opened up yeah, an exquisite ecstatic subtlety in the body that's, yeah, I don't really have another word other than subtlety actually, but it's just it's readily accessible and there, and it's a guidance. It's become a guidance. It's like, if that's not there, what's happened? Where did that get lost? And tracking back to there, and oh, okay, and then oh, we went this way instead of that way, or this activated or that activated, and so it's a guidance system for me. It's like it increases when I'm moving towards, um, I would say, my path, and it decreases when I'm moving away from that, or yeah, so it's a guidance system as well as an experience in the body.
You very interestingly named atoms and, matter, and I imagined for people that might be like, "What? You can feel atoms?" And I a new thing to even consider. And so I'm curious, how do you feel? Like, and what do you feel at that level of subtlety? If you could just bring us in there a little bit.
It's so, difficult to find the words around this stuff, right? Because it's, talking about, um, experiences that are difficult to name. Um, the closest the closest word I could come to when the atoms, like, there's the scientific, view of what the atom is, and then there's, like, the esoteric or the more, spiritual, shamanic, or whatever words you wanna use around it, and for me, the way I would word that is that inside the atom is divinity and love and source, just as a lot of people see source as being, out in the cosmos or more in the macro, but also that same divinity is inside the atom. And accessing that brings alive a quality of ecstatic, and I kind of see that love is spinning on that axis. Um, and of course, we can access love through the heart, and we can access love, um, through consciousness and through awareness, but we can also access it through the atoms, and it opens. It's like the macro and the micro. Each atom is a little universe in itself, and you can actually through the atom access the larger universe, and in the larger universe can access the smaller one. And one of the things I find so fascinating is, and it's been part of the exploration of dark divinity, that's anchored in cosmology, not so much deities or religious icons, is that as something's discovered on the macro level, like they discover a black hole, they discover a dark energy or something like that, equally there's something also discovered in the micro level. So I find that really fascinating, that link, um, with how things are revealed.
Wow.
Mm.
This really lands for me about the God, the divinity in the atom. And as you were speaking earlier, just imagining like the ascension path that God is like above, and it would make complete sense that as part of the descension path, God would be in the
Mm.
tiniest
Mm.
atom. Like it's just yeah, it really somehow it lands, and I
Mm.
can find myself in that exploration with
Mm.
you.
Was one of the, when Bruce and I first met, it was one of the things that kind of drew us into this path together, because we were both experiencing this, non-dual dark. And it was it it was like his experiences, or you go up to the dark, and I go, No, you go down to the dark." You go up t No, you go down to the dark." And so it was this realization, "Oh, actually the dark's everywhere, and you can go up or you can go down, you can go through the heart, and depending on your access point, can determine what your experience of that is, but it's the same divinity, it's the same dark." Yeah. And a lot of the feminine philosophies and pathways are pointing to that, because they are more the descent path to experiencing divinity in the body, right in the core, right in matter. And the more ascension paths are more taking up to experience divinity out through the crown and into the larger, spaciousness of the cosmos.
It makes total sense. It makes total
Mm.
sense um, that there's this inherent difference just in our biology and the way that we experience divinity and oneness.
Yeah, different access points. However, we can access, just like with the womb journey, that male bodies can also experience their etheric wombs, and um, male bodies can also access matter, and female bodies can access consciousness. And it just depends. Yeah, sometimes it's not even around gender. Some people just have more access to matter, and some people have more access to awareness, um, and we can learn to create portals to those other ones when we become aware that they exist.
So beautiful. Another one of my favorite questions that somehow fits here to ask um, facilitators is how you listen. Um, I'm just curious to hear about your process, and I think you can interpret it however you'd like. But the art of facilitation is listening is such a foundational skill, and I find we all do it in really interesting ways. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you listen.
Yeah, I feel it one of the ways my body receives information and listens is through vibration, actually, through the vibration of my body. Um, Almost like I was just sharing earlier around the way vibration guides me in life, it also guides me in listening as well. Noticing in a field when contraction comes in. Um, it's almost like there's contraction in the container. I'll feel it in my body. If there's opening in the container, I feel it in my body. And so, of course, one of the arts of facilitation is being able to discern about when that's my own personal contraction, or whether there's it's a tuning into the field. And I do find when I'm holding point for fields, I think it's probably more of a matter way of working. It's almost like I feel my energetic body becomes a field in some way, and there's a sensing and feeling through that. And then after the container finishes, it comes back into its own sphere again. So it's very much a frequency vibrational listening. I think that, I mean, obviously there's other ways as well, but that's would be, I think, is my primary way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. No, I know this experience, and I think one of the skills of being a facilitator is being able to translate and have a really intimate connection to the the experience of your body and what's happening, and um, in real time, being able to translate that information into something that you can work with or move with. Um, um, yeah, it's beautiful. You're speaking to a theme that has now been repeating many times here in this space, and also even the translation of um, the group becoming a body um, uh, is also um, quite present and relevant in this space. And what I'm so deeply appreciating is the different ways each facilitator works with the same phenomena. And particularly, there's a different quality right now of talking to you and being, even as we speak about it, like more in matter myself, feeling the impact of that frequency that you're inviting in just in my own body. My voice is also a bit deeper.
Working in that way with facilitation is, and I guess that's where having support teams around to be that discerning information around, oh, what's being felt right now? Is this the field, or is this mine? Because a shadow of that is when, oh, actually, I'm not going to do my own stuff and process my own things. I'm just going to process it all through the container. I'm going to take the group on that process with me, or being able to discern that what is the group field, and I get that information comes from the field. Is in my experience, it's like it's coming through sharings, or it's coming in other ways to kind of check in and yeah, this does feel like it's a field thing, um and around the group body also, I feel like more and more that's where the work's going. In some ways, I almost feel like a lot of the ways of working in group spaces that have got us to here, I think were really necessary to get us to here. But now we're here, I think actually something different's happening, and it is becoming more group body, group intelligence, and not so much a facilitator teaching or doing those kind of things. It's more learning how to create containers where the group body is actually the intelligence, and what's coming through there and working. With a quality that's coming through quite strongly now as synthesis. So there's like the things are synthesizing through. Yeah, that feels alive for me, very alive. Um, and I don't know if it's even, yeah, I mean, an exploration around that as to actually what that looks like going forward in my life. Yeah.
I'd love to hang out here a little bit. I'd love to speak. You mentioned there's some things and there's some ways that we've been doing groups that feel like maybe they're complete or that was we're moving on, and I would just even love to circle in and maybe talk about some of those things. Like what are some of those ways that we've been facilitating, or those patterns or those practices that have been um so second nature to the work that feel like, yeah, that time is over now.
I mean, and I'm probably even talking in a longer time period, and I think we're probably in a transition period, so it's not so black and white. But I think the age of the guru is going at the age of the expert teacher up the front, and delivering their thing that people take on and whatever. Like I think there's been times, particularly in spiritual spaces, when there's been I would say, a development of soul over, y you know, the hundreds, thousands of years, where almost that intermediate was needed. I think something else is more accessible now, and that's what I'm noticing in groups. It's things are so much more accessible now, even with the dark. Like 10 years ago, the dark was a um, very newish, and or even descent work, like so much was needed to put in place for it to open, the container to open. Whereas I'm finding now things are just seem so much more accessible to people. Um, so yeah, I feel that's part of even a lot of the turmoil in the field is there's something new wanting to emerge in how work is done, how group work is done, and I know in different containers, I'm exploring that, and I just I was just with a group. We went to Uluru on a land pilgrimage, and yeah, this beautiful exquisiteness of being in a group, and it's more the art of creating the group now. I feel like that's what it is. It's more the art of creating the group, so that the instruments there it is more it rather than the art of knowing things that are being taught to people. You know. Don't know if that makes sense to you in your world, but
It totally makes sense to me in my world. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. This is like that what you just named is maybe like my life's passion is even that, the art of how to bring a group together that can where the group intelligence is what we're all in service of and to, and allowing that organism to emerge. So yeah, this is juicy stuff for me. I like this. Yeah, and, like, so I know you're also training facilitators, you're exploring this. What are some of the qualities of a facilitator or that a facilitator needs now to be able to make this transition and hold these kinds of spaces?
well, I think we touched on the listening before. Definitely listening. Um, I think really the facilitator needs to have experience of being in those kind of group spaces so that it's an um, bodied piece. And what I've noticed as this piece has been emerging over the last years, that and different spaces, it's almost like it's kind of revealing the ingredients because i- putting a group together, lots of things can happen, and particularly if there's a lot of personality stuff that's there and shadow work has been done, and it turns into an interpersonal process rather than opening to something deeper under that. So in some ways, I feel like a certain amount of work needs to have been done, but it seems to be becoming more and more accessible on the other side of that. And I think even the days of so much work needing to be done is starting to shift as well. I almost feel like there's been a collective something that's being done that's opened possibilities and pathways in other areas. Particularly with people that have been in the field for a while, I think there's definitely things opening. So yeah, so listening, this is where I actually find the dark technology is key because I think my experience in groups is it brings in the inner synthesis in the group um, faster than anything else I know, and continues to keep the group coherent. Um, and it's like you were saying, that turning. It's almost like the people that are there need to be more committed to what's coming through the center than their own personal agendas, and it's not bypassing the personal. I mean, the personal is welcomed, but it's not running the show and dominating. It's in integration with these other parts, with the soul, and also anchored in the dark. But that's predominantly what's dancing the group. It's predominantly the one body has is working as the different cells, and it's the dark that creates the synthesis in that to allow that dance to happen. In my experience.
Mm, mm. Oh, I love this. I know this is maybe a little bit of like a far reach or an unanswerable question, but I just ask it out of curiosity. Like, you've been, I would consider you an amazing elder in this path, and you've been on this journey for quite a long time. So you've even seen groups before my time. You have a history and a experiential touch point that is much wiser than my own, and I would love to access some of that, which is also looking at, as we're starting to name where it looks like groups are going. I just want to, like, what are you hoping? What is your greatest hope or wish that you'd love to see that we're moving towards collectively through the work that we're able to do in groups?
Well, I mean, this is, I guess, where my aliveness is groups that are accessing this a greater awareness and intelligence and um, energetic cohesion that can be accessed by one person. And I feel like this is where the new emergence comes from. That it's coming through these group experiences, whereas in some ways in the past it's more transmissions come through someone that then has then gathered a group of, and taught that and taught other people to do that and whatever. I think it's beyond that now. It's now where the intelligence is coming through is the group. So, um, yeah, I love to see that technology becoming more available and more people interested in that technology and coming into that technology so we can start accessing and bringing through the things that the world is needing right now because as we know, there's a lot of polarity playing out on every direction, on every theme, on every topic. And what I actually see is it's because at some level it's wanting to collapse into the non-dual, and so it's like the extremes of all these polarities are doing this and doing this and doing this. So the more groups there are that are working and accessing the non-dual, that can bring through this and have the capability to pierce any polarity through and collapse it, um, to be able to sit as the whole, not over identifying the one particular thing, which doesn't mean not standing for something, but it's standing for something while connected to the whole, which is very different to standing for something in polarity at war with the other place. And that's the thing that needs to shift right now. And I feel like in groups, I think the groups, the leading edge groups that are doing this are doing that work. They're doing that work of learning how to collapse those polarities, which is, what I see is needs to emerge through the world. Um, yeah, it could be my idealist, but that's definitely my prayer. Yeah.
Mm. No, this is beautiful, and it speaks to one of the things that I really appreciate about you. Um, and it's this piece around collapsing polarity. You've really, from how I understand your, I don't know if it's through conversations we've had, I understand you've done a lot of work, um, personally through yourself, but in service of groups to collapse polarity, like putting yourself in the hot seat many times in ways that for me feel very brave and also risky. And I would love to give a little space to hear, because I think this is an important um, it's an important piece that you hold that I don't think many people are willing to go there. So I'd love from people to hear from you what motivates you to keep going there and doing that work in the ways that you've done that have been so powerful and meaningful and risky.
Well, I feel
Yeah.
like doing the collapsing polarities. I think I think that probably the deepest reason for that is it's for me it's the portal to more love, and and more more wholeness in my own being, and more wholeness in group fields. And it's a way I live my life, is that I know if I want the outer wars to stop in the world, I need to look at where the inner wars are. And as the fractal, there's so much we can do in times where we can feel overwhelmed and helpless with what's going on in the outer. To actually, where am I at war? Where's the piece in me that's got a projection, or the piece in me that's got some activation that I can pierce through? And I call it piercing through to innocence, but sometimes those words can be misinterpreted, and to meaning, oh, let's just love everybody, and let's just and no accountability, and it doesn't mean that at all. But it means being able to find that peace in me, and what is the vulnerability underneath that peace. And when I can find that, um, if there is something I'm feeling strongly about, or if something needs to be held accountable, it's done from a place of understanding that piece on the other side, owning it as a part inside me, in however that plays out, um, that then actually creates connection and deepens connection, and I think has much faster results than the war approach. Yeah. So I guess there's lots of reasons for me. It's deep transpersonal work. It's my spiritual practice. It's my spiritual practice I dedicated to for so many years. And I think it's created in myself just so much more ability to love. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you maybe this is a fun time for a story, um to share a little story maybe about the hardest polarity that you've had to collapse, like which one really challenged you the most and what the process you had to go through was for in that?
Wow, there's nothing. It just feels like there's so many because it's just such a part of how I move and work. Um, in some ways, probably the hardest one would have been like in the the earlier ones, like now I kind of know the process and I can work with it, and I know how to find the tricky bits, because one of the things that'll come in is, well, I don't do that. I would never do that. Like, how could that be a reflection of me? So I've kind of learned how to, okay, how to, you know, excavate in to find, oh, that's where it is, because sometimes it can be very subtle and very tricky, and sometimes it can almost be in the opposite direction too. Like, it can be an overexpressed quality, could be underexpressed in someone else, and that's where it is. So there's all that. But I would say probably the hardest one maybe was, I remember when my dad died when I was 25, and I remember at that time there was somebody in the world that was creating a lot of havoc and destruction and death. And I just remember feeling such hatred for that person, and like, why do you get to live when my dad didn't? My dad, who was doing good in the world, and how come you get to live, you fucker? you know? So I would say that was probably one of the hardest ones, because it was in the early days, and I didn't really have the technology. I didn't know descent work, and all I had was a bit of a new age philosophy about projection.
So so today, so let's say like today, something pops up. There's a like you're feeling activated or hatred or, something. Like what is your process? Where do you, how do you, what is the process of recognizing it? And then once you recognize it, you're like, okay, here's what I have to do
Mm.
next.
I would say that process has changed over years. It's like it's quite um where I what I do now is I will just drop into the dark, actually. Like, just be aware of it, and then drop into the dark, and just then let my body move if it wants to move, or sound, and usually it drops in pretty quick. Um Whereas in the past, like when I've been doing, like, for people that are just beginning with this work, that would probably be a little bit difficult to access. So where I would more tend to go with it is with aspecting, actually, or shamanic aspecting, I would call it, because aspecting in some ways gets a bit of a bad name and interpreted in different ways sometimes. But it's like working with whatever that is, and bringing expression and bringing sound and bringing movement, and really calling it in shamanically to let it move through the body, not just being a mind process, or even like not a looping emotional body process, but actually to go really deeply in it. But the important bit is to switch to the other side and embody that other polarity, and really sense and feel as that, and to more understand what's going on, and move back and forth. That's one way of collapsing it. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, aspecting
Yeah.
work.
But
Great.
aspecting, a lot of people, when they say aspecting, it's more of a mind thing. It's more of a conversation, which is that's not what I mean. When it's in the shamanic, it's really feeling it at a deeper level, and um yeah, almost like creating a field and letting that move through and reveal, like a medicine journey in some ways, like that kind of an experience, not a psychological process, that you might do in a counseling session. It's like a medicine journey where you're actually creating a container and allowing the energies to reveal and move as you embody. And quite often such potency and power comes through that, and more awareness and more understanding, and more embracing of the whole. Um, and more clarity, then, if there is something, action that needs to be taken, that can be taken strongly, actually, fiercely sometimes, but not from a place of war.
Mm, mm. I love this distinction you're making where aspecting can be interpreted as this kind of mental mind conversation back and forth, and you're kind of, it sounds like what you're wanting to really drop is the descent work that's part of the aspecting. So it's like it's bringing in the body, bringing in the emotion, bringing and kind of descending through those layers as yeah, it becomes a spiral then, the aspecting work that lands. We were also just speaking, and you were bringing in when these practices become more like medicine work. and there's a very beautiful, very powerful ritualistic aspect to your work, that feels very ancient. Um, as I've, um, received you, we have the honor that I have actually been in your space before, which is great when there's people whose spaces I haven't, been in. It's different, and, I just wanna appreciate the quality, um, of space that you're able to open and invite people into, and have you share a little bit about the role of ritual in transformation.
Yeah, for me, ritual brings in intention and potency that deepens in that space. It's also a way of opening a group field. It's working with the elements and shamanic aspects of life. It's so difficult. I find it so hard to put words on things at times. It is ancient. It is ancient. Ritual has been done for so many, thousands of years probably. Um, and I guess the potency is the shifts that I feel in a ritual space that's really goes into the core of things. Um, is different to other processes. It's magic. Magic comes in. I sort of feel that's part of what a ritual space is. It's actually um, it's allowing allowing energy that's beyond what we know, what our humans know or our minds know to support us. And to me, it's magic. It's magic in such a deep way of what happens in those spaces that, when I'm in ritual space, the biggest thing is just to get me out of the way because I know that the space can guide and bring in what is needed for that particular moment.
As I'm naming this quality of your ritual, your ritual spaces, which feels ancient, I'm wondering, like, if you have an idea of why or how you have that that special sauce, like that quality, whereas other facilitators wouldn't have that. What has it been something in your life that you've done? Has it been a teacher or a tradition that you've learned from? Is it just innately your frequency? Like, what do you think has given you um, that quality of being able to hold spaces that feel ancient?
Yeah, I don't even really know. I think it's all those things at some level, but I couldn't say it's one thing. In my earlier years, I was in different people's spaces and studied with different people. Um, but when I look through my life, I can see um, I've always been drawn to ritual in some way. I grew up as a Catholic, and even though I'm not, there was obviously a lot of had to unravel around that. Um, I used to play rituals when I was a kid, so it's like I think it's an innate note of my soul that then became forged through time. And I didn't know it kind of just started to show itself to me. Um, and also being supported by being with teachers in my earlier years that could hold ritual spaces. So there was a transmission. I would say there was a transmission that's beyond words, actually. It wasn't like I learned do this, 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 and this, because ritual's not really sure you can have all the ingredients and you can perform the things, but it's not, it's a subtle transmission that just where the space opens. And um, yeah, so I would say that somehow, somewhere I received that transmission somehow, and um, it's it's just been able to show me, yeah, to show me. And I think actually land has been a huge thing for me, like connection with the earth. Like I would say that's when things really started opening more for me when I deepened my connection with the earth, and the elements, and just allowing those things to start moving and opening and guiding. And when the shamanic comes in, a creature comes in just at the particular moment in a ritual, or the rain comes at a particular time, the lightning strike, or there's something about when ritual space opens up, all of nature and the elements come in to celebrate it and support it, and they're excited, something like that these people are gathering in this way. Yeah.
Yeah, this was another piece I was really excited to talk to you about. It's great because we're just we're just going through them, which was, yeah, your connection to land and having land as almost like a co-facilitator, in your space. And I'd love to just, yeah, just speak a little bit more about how you invite the earth, intelligence in when you're guiding groups. You've started already, but maybe there's,
Yeah,
yeah.
the land's very important to me. I'm really lucky that I live on land. I live on 125 acres of land, of wild land. And it's
Wow.
before I moved here, I kind of reached a place in my life where every spare minute or whatever, I was just going out to wild land. I just couldn't, and then I realized I've just actually got to live on it. I can't. This is
Yeah,
to live on it.
yeah.
And I feel like that's when the earth formally became my teacher in some ways, like, because it was like
Mm.
in some ways, my journey without a teacher started to change, and the land m became my main teacher. Um, and so when I work with groups and things like that, the land's very important. The quality of the land is much more important to me than what the venue looks like, or any of those kind of things. Like, I'm interested in working where there's potency, activated land that's got wild spaces, and places where we can go onto the land and involve that in what's happening. Um, and I call it in, and support people to connect with land themselves. So we're all working with it. We're all inviting it in and connecting with it, because it's so amazing when it starts to just come in and weave. And I just I was with a group. We went to these sacred sites in Australia together, and working as a group body, and just having how the land came in as it's part of the field, like it's part of the group. It's the main thing, and we actually went there to go to a particular sacred site inland. Like, that was our whole purpose. That's my temple, really. My land is my temple. So it's like I'm in my temple. I'm in the temple. Is how I relate to land. Yeah.
Ah, so lovely, so lovely. It sounds like an amazing, journey to go on with you. Are there any important, when working with the land, is there anything, um, important um, that you do to open that space or to guide participants? Like, are there any foundational practices that you bring in?
Yeah, I mean, first, one of the things is supporting people to find their own relationship with the land, like to introduce themselves to the land through images, or through find their way in, because I think the land, as you work with the land, it opens to the degree that you can move through its portals. And, people that do medicine journeys know this, because they tend to have experiences, but they don't really know how they got to that. So I feel like part of it is learning how to do that without needing an outer substance, but just the land itself. And, simple things like exploring through the senses, and um, really coming into presence with the land, starting to really tune in. And as you start deepening with land, it's almost like sitting with the tree and sensing, what is it communicating, sitting with the flower, seeing where the brighter parts are that are guiding you here or guiding you there, and where's vibration in the body more intense if I go this way or that way. It's like working with it, listening to it, like a deep listening, the silence, being in the silence. That in some ways, I wonder whether so much of the trauma that's surfacing in the world, how different that would be if people were on land, like in connection with land and off devices. And I think a lot would happen to just throw the devices away, go into the wild for a week and sleep under the stars. I think a lot moves because, the land also transmits trauma. So yeah, it's such an important part of my life and yeah, the way I live and breathe and move and want to be with people in that magic of land.
Oh, yeah. You're speaking to a real longing of mine. I'm at that same point that you mentioned where I'm just going from wild land to wild land, and I'm like, "No, it's time. I just need my own land."
Yeah, it
Yeah.
becomes like an
So,
unquenchable thirst or something. Well, that's what I felt in myself was like an unquenchable thirst. It was like there was no choice in some ways. There was no choice.